Okay. Spencer Anderson, our lecturer today, holds a BS and MS in psychology from BYU, as well as an MBA from the University of Virginia. He is the founder and CEO of Divina Wellness, a health supplement company formulating over 400 products. Spencer has presented papers at multiple conferences and published numerous papers on mental health. He is currently writing a book tentatively called Why We Do the Things We Don't Want to Do. Spencer has taught faculty, graduate students, and more than 1,300 students in his Master Your Mind lecture series. Please join with me in welcoming Spencer Anderson.
Thanks. It's good to be with you. So over the last 20 and 25 years, I've really realized how much of our life is based around trying to escape difficult emotions. So almost every mental health issue, anxiety, depression, ADHD, is a different style and different format of running away from difficult emotions. And by that, I mean, usually a fear of something. So Montaigne, several hundred years ago, said a man who fears suffering is already suffering from what he fears. So let me start with a video to set the stage.
Okay, not quite yet.
So clammy. Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and gently put it.
Oh my God.
All right, okay. Okay, that was fine.
Oh, okay.
That was fine. Yeah, no, stand over.
Thank you. So this was a really good first session. I felt pretty safe, but I was a lot more nervous than I thought I would be. And I'm having trouble like calming down, and then I discovered I was sweating a little. I can't decide if I'm stupid or like, or if this doesn't make any sense to me right now. I know it makes sense, but right now it doesn't make sense. They look different than I would expect them to.
How come?
I don't know. I guess I never looked that closely.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of part of this too, is you get to learn a little.
Oh.
There we go.
Hello. Oh my God. Ew. Yeah, there's a lot there.
Yeah.
That's gross.
Would you like to take these guys home with you?
No.
Will you take them home?
Yeah, I'll take them.
Anybody else scared of cockroaches or mice? My wife will not be in the same room. So let me ask this question. Does she fear the cockroaches or the feelings she has when she sees the cockroaches? What do you think? Normally you'd say the cockroaches, right? But because I'm starting this with this question, it should be obvious, right? What do you think she actually fears? The feeling. And I think we know that because if she even imagined cockroaches in her mind, she would probably start to sweat, start to have the same emotions. So you could actually hear her talk about this, this interplay between two parts of her brain. She was like, I know this is stupid, but I can't help but feel this. So if you look at the biology of what's going on, our brain is primarily designed to protect us. And our brain is looking and learning for things that are dangerous at all times. And it learns by associating feelings of fear with people, situations, things, bodily sensations. It's very similar to how Pavlov's dog experiment went with the association of the bell and the salivation. So when you come across something in the future that's similar, your body warns you of the danger. And this is stored in the lower primal brain with the amygdala and some of the other more primal parts of the brain. So, and that has a hard time being overrid by the rational brain in some of these anxious situations. And Nate Bargatze, the comedian, has something to say about these two parts of the brain. Those as well. So let me ask a question. Fear is designed to be life-saving, but it feels terrible. So how do you and I normally respond? Somebody shout it out. Run away. But this creates the very problem we're talking about today. So when you act on a perceived threat by avoiding people, things, and experiences, you are teaching your brain that they are real dangers, not just perceptions. Fear strengthens with repeated avoidance. So the cycle goes something like this. At the top of this cycle, we feel some kind of difficult emotions. So that could be the cockroaches for this lady. It could be math class, could be homework in general or work, could be asking someone out on a date, could be having to have a difficult conversation with your spouse or your child. So you end up avoiding it somehow, which then provides short-term relief. But because you didn't actually face the problem, that ends up turning into long-term anxiety. And then every time you do this, it creates the cycle. So the fear and anxiety is just one of many uncomfortable emotions. Here's a list of just a sampling. There's 10 times more than this, but I want you to think as you read this list, how you normally avoid or escape these feelings. How do you handle boredom or conflict or overwhelm at work or home? Sadness, shame, deadlines, awkward conversations. I could list some others, fear of success, etc. So we live in a time and an age where this is growing in abundance and amplification. So we typically avoid, and we have our own styles of this. So I don't know, I'm sure none of you use online streaming to escape any feelings or social media. And I'm sure none of your kids do this either, or food, gaming, shopping. They call it, what do they call it? Retail therapy. Pornography is often in this, is not always, but sometimes not about sex at all. And sometimes it's just about escaping the difficult emotion. The word of wisdom, luckily, hopefully, prevents us from having these problems. Unfortunately, Joseph Smith did not put sugar in Section 89. But we bless that they nourish and strengthen our bodies, so I'm sure it's okay. Even something that's kind of viewed as healthy, like workaholism, because who doesn't think that you should do good at your job? Something like this that is socially rewarded, it often keeps us from dealing with difficult emotions at home. Because that's kind of an always good excuse. And I think we could even use church activities as an escape to some degree.
Procrastination has something to do with work. Believe it or not, procrastination has nothing to do with your work. Procrastination is a form of stress relief. Let me explain this. So let's say that you've got some stuff going on in your life, and heck, who doesn't have stuff going on in your life? Maybe you're fighting with your significant other. Maybe mom's or dad's health is failing and it's really, really upsetting you. Maybe you've got some financial stuff. You put too much of your savings into Bitcoin, and now that that's crashed, you're stressed out about it, right? And so you go into work, and when you get into work, you got stuff to do. You kind of walk in, and you got this big stress ball that subconsciously is hanging over your head. And so you walk in and you sit down, and you know you got 13 phone calls you need to make. And you also know that you've been chickening out, you've been making easy calls, and there's a bunch of CIOs or other people that are higher level that you haven't been calling. And so as you sit down to do it, and you got the stress on your shoulders, your brain, it starts to go, wait a minute, well, you want me to make a call to somebody that I'm scared to make? Absolutely not. I'm so stressed out about, can we just watch some cat videos for a minute? And next thing you know, an hour's gone by. And then, of course, what do? You beat yourself up. So the only way that you can break this habit, and that's an important word for you to hear, You're not a procrastinator. You have a habit of procrastinating. Big.
So I'm sure none of you are procrastinators in the room, but just like the cockroaches, often we mistake what we're avoiding as the problem. But if you really think about it, it's the emotions, the anticipated emotion we feel around that behavior, that task at work, the thing you got to do at home. It's the emotion that surrounds it. And you're anticipating how that feeling is going to feel. And so you're trying to avoid it. So you postpone it with something that's enjoyable. So it just goes round and round, and then you end up becoming habituated to whatever your avoidance style is. And every time you do it, you're laying down tracks between neurons. And so after a while, you get a fatty substance called myelin that forms around the neuron connection. And that can go up to 100 to 300 times faster, the neuron connection. That's why things become so automatic that you whip out your phone if you're bored in line, or you're escaping to reading or TV. You just kind of have your natural escape that comes by habit. And so this is the habit loop. And it typically starts with some kind of stress or anxiety, and then you create this trigger, which leads to your preferred type of escape, which reduces the stress, but then often produces some kind of guilt or shame. This is what happens with pornography, and that's why it becomes compulsive in nature, is because now your escaping behavior has produced such a disturbing feeling about yourself that you need something to escape that feeling. So then you use more pornography or whatever you're using to escape to get away from the feelings of guilt and shame. So it just compels itself. So there was a study, 42 people were given the option of sitting quietly for 15 minutes with no distractions or giving themselves an electric shock. What would you do? More than 2/3 of the men and 1/4 of the women chose to shock themselves instead of being left to their thoughts. Good on you, women in the crowd. Nice. These were people who told researchers beforehand that they would be willing to pay to avoid the shocks. So it's this difficulty of sitting alone with your thoughts and emotions, which we seem to become less able to do the more technological advances we have, the better food we've got, the more escape we have. So another form of avoiding difficult emotions, and this is in some ways more insidious, I think, because it's so common. We fear what other people think about us. And some of us more than others. You're almost a psychopath if you don't care what anybody thinks of you, but this can lead to lots of protective behavior. Let me give you an example. This is Dr. Tyler Jarvis in the math department, who talks about his experience at graduate school at Princeton.
In graduate school many years ago, I was lucky enough to be admitted to a school with some famous faculty members. I'd done pretty well in undergraduate classes, and I thought I was pretty smart. So when it came time to choose classes and teachers, I chose some of the most famous teachers I could. One of them was especially impressive. He was a Fields medalist, the nearest thing in mathematics to a Nobel Prize winner. Other students spoke of him with awe, both because of his brilliance and because of his reputation for criticizing students. When I heard how he'd berated a student for being both lazy and stupid, I determined I would never give him cause to criticize me like that. I decided never to ask him for advice or help until I had exhausted every other means for solving a problem. The result was, he never criticized me, but I also never learned much from him. I spent 3 years in his classes and only spoke with him for a total of about 45 minutes. Another of his students had no fear at all. He would go to this professor almost every day to ask questions. And he was criticized regularly, but he never seemed to care. I thought he was completely crazy, but he went back almost every day and got his questions answered and learned a lot. It took me several years after graduation to realize I had wasted the opportunity of a lifetime. This other student wasn't so crazy after all. He got many hours of personal tutoring from one of the world's greatest mathematical minds, and I got through graduate school safely without being criticized.
So I want you to think, what kind of things are you keeping yourself from accomplishing because you're worried about what other people think of you? So this plays out in social anxiety or anxiety in social situations. Doesn't necessarily have to be a clinical degree. So Ellen Hendrickson says the core of social anxiety is the sense that something embarrassing, deficient, or flawed about us will become obvious to everyone. Social anxiety isn't just fear of judgment, it's fear the judges are right. We think there is something wrong with us and we avoid in order to conceal it. But have you actually ever heard anyone say, wow, you sure are uncomfortable, you're weird and don't belong here? Probably not. So you got to wonder how much of this is in our mind and just perceived but not real. So another one, and this is very common in the LDS culture because we're so afraid of conflict, is being a people pleaser. And this is essentially being nice in order to subtly manipulate people into liking us. And we don't think it's a manipulation and we just think we're being nice, but there's this covert contract operating that if I'm nice to you, then you have to meet my needs and you have to be nice to me. But you can know you're a people pleaser if they don't treat you nice and then you get upset about it. So we often talk about people pleasing as you can never say no, you overfill your schedule, you don't have time for this, like with church activities or work. But I've actually found that it's this fear of being rejected. So I teach this similar class to students in the fall and winter, and I find myself doing this because I'll ask for periodic feedback and I'll get hundreds of feedback and I'll be, yeah, good. And my eyes will just stick on that one negative comment. Or I'll see somebody that's falling asleep or looking at their phone during the lecture, and that is the only person I can look at. And it drives me crazy. I'm like, what am I doing wrong that they can't pay attention to? This is all part of being a people pleaser because we want to be liked. And of course, everybody wants to be liked, but even Michael Scott from The Office experiences this.
Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like this compulsive need to be liked, like my need to be praised.
Here's the secret. When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun, and fear is the annoying backseat driver.
Say it again.
When perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun. We struggle with perfectionism in areas where we feel most vulnerable to shame. Does that make sense? So we're all comfortable saying, yeah, I'm a little perfectionistic, which is code for like I do things really well. But I'm not comfortable saying I have shame. But perfectionism, what is that? I call it the 20-ton shield. Here's what perfectionism really is. It's a way of thinking that says this: if I look perfect, live perfect, work perfect, I can avoid or minimize criticism, blame, and ridicule.
Whoa, that's good.
All perfectionism is the 20-ton shield that we carry around hoping that it'll keep us from being hurt. When in truth, what it does is it keeps us from being seen. And so we had
Okay, so do we see this in our LDS culture at all? This idea of perfectionism, obedience, serving in your ward, etc., appearances of righteousness, etc. I'll assume that 95% of you say yes. I see some heads nodding. So raise your hand if you work with students directly. Okay, anybody see manifestations of perfectionism in BYU students? Every head of yours should be nodding yes. This is an incredibly high performing university. I went over to the housing department because my daughter is starting BYU this fall. And I was like, well, yeah, but why doesn't she have a place in Heritage? That's where she wanted to live. And she applied before the deadline, before the priority deadline. And the student or the person, the staff there was like, well, you don't understand it. Everybody at BYU is an overachiever. So like the priority deadline is the real deadline. So it was no big deal that that my daughter got in the priority deadline. And I started to realize self-esteem, self-worth, all hanging on that 4.0 GPA, especially coming from high school, where probably many of our students are used to being in the top 10% of their class. Then they get here with similar students who have done just as amazing things in their high school, and then they have to deal with their new self-esteem that's based on outward achievement. They're like, I can no longer be in the top 10% at BYU anymore. And so they have to kind of reevaluate and readjust what is their worth based on. So this can manifest in so many ways. And what is so tricky and nefarious about perfectionism is society rewards it. If you're the best employee in your department, if you meet every deadline, if you get a 4.0, if you look perfect, if you do everything right, that doesn't sound so terrible, does it? And society rewards it. We had a professor in the math department who is very keen on and aware of perfectionism. And she'd get students that would write 10 pages of proofs, and she wanted to get them to write less. So she actually incentivized them with more points to write less than 8 pages. And some people just couldn't mentally do that. They wouldn't allow themselves to do that. So let me introduce a very famous quote. I love Carl Jung. What you resist persists. Famous psychologist, most known as Freud's student. This sense is that it's impossible to process difficult emotions if you're always running away from them. So let me just do an experiment. Close your eyes. Don't think of a pink elephant. Okay, who's not thinking of a pink elephant? Okay, open your eyes. You can't not think of a pink elephant, right? So it's the very nature of trying not to do something that makes you do it. It's this kind of phenomenon of, it's often called the backwards law. The more you try to do something, the less you do it, and the more you try not to do it, the more you do it. So let me show you a quick video in regards to that.
The emotion that we don't want to feel is the emotion that we invite in the exact way that we try to avoid it. So the perfect example of this in my life was I, had this experience of being emotionally abandoned as a kid. And so I would just keep on finding emotional abandonment everywhere I looked. It was like, the guy who's like, close their eyes at a bar, throw a dart behind their back, and they're always going to hit the wounded woman, and like they're going to be attracted to one another, and that's how it's going to work. Like it was, so I always, created this abandonment. And so when I thought it was coming, when I saw the abandonment, even though maybe it wasn't there, I would harden up. I would get angry or something, which of course creates more likelihood of abandonment. So I would try to not feel it, and in the way of not feeling it, or I would really try to caretake somebody, and that would create resentment in them. And then they would abandon me. So every way that I tried to avoid it, I was recreating it in my life.
So I talk about this because I want to figure out a way, okay, we don't necessarily want to feel these negative emotions, but running away from negative emotions actually creates more negative emotions. So how do we actually deal with them? So let me just give you some more examples. A person might say, I don't want to be alone. They're afraid of being lonely. So they end up in a relationship acting needy and clingy to make sure the relationship works out. But that very behavior, not many people like to be around needy and clingy people. So that drives them away. So they end up creating the very situation they didn't want by pushing people away. Another one is somebody who doesn't trust people because they've always let them down. So they find that I subconsciously keep people at a safe distance, and then they realize, see, I'm all alone. And another one, I don't want to feel like a failure, so I'll avoid XYZ because I might fail, and therefore I failed because I didn't even try. So the last situation. So let's assume this woman wants to make friends, wants people to reach out to her. But how do you interpret her body language? Standoffish. She's not saying anything. She's not making eye contact. She's not moving around the room. So she's actually going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy where she thinks, well, nobody wants to talk to me. If they would, they'd come up and talk to me. But every signal that she's sending out is stay away. So she ends up creating this self-fulfilling prophecy that she gets the reaction she doesn't want because of the way she's acting. And it just reaffirms her core belief. So I want you to think, does anybody want to name an unwanted emotion in their life that they try to avoid and how they avoid it? Anybody want to be vulnerable? What's that? Oh, that's a really good one, actually. You want to avoid the discomfort of vulnerability. You're all doing it right now. Thank you very much. Because you're opening yourself up to criticism. So it's very hard to reveal what's going on. But this is your homework assignment. I want you to think of how extensive this is in your life. What do you avoid and how do you do it? What's your style? So Freud himself said unexpressed emotions will never die. They're buried alive and they will come forth later in uglier ways. It's kind of like if you try to hold a beach ball underwater, like it's gonna pop out. So it has to be processed.
You know how with a Chinese finger trap, the most natural response is to pull away, right? But when you do, the trap tightens and it becomes impossible to escape. Well, something I talk to people about in therapy is that dealing with painful feelings is much the same. So let's say you feel anxious, you escape and then avoid the things that make you feel anxious so that you can feel safe. Or when you're overwhelmed with a deep sadness, you might stay busy or eat or drink to block it out. When you do that, the emotion that you're trying to escape tightens its grip on your life because then you have to make your decisions based on the things you don't want to feel. But something people learn in therapy is that when we turn towards those feelings and we're willing to be in that space, then the trap widens and you get this wiggle room. Then you get to choose when to be with that feeling and when to step away from it without having to fight your way free.
So if we create fears by avoiding, how do we get rid of the fears and process uncomfortable emotions? Somebody answer that nice and loud. Anybody? Yeah, we face them. So we lean into them. So instead of running away, you lean into it. You get curious. Why am I feeling this way? What's at play here? What's the subconscious thing going on right now? And sit with that emotion. Accept that you're feeling the emotion. And realize that you're not going to die. It's just an uncomfortable physical emotion. So when you do what you're afraid of, you retrain that brain that it's not in danger. So the brain is inside a black box and it actually does not interact with reality directly. It does so through the senses through guessing, prediction. So it's not like it's what the brain thinks is reality, it's what it perceives. So you need to retrain it to perceive things as safe. So in September 29th, 2006, I woke up because my wife went to go feed my newborn baby. Woke up at like 2 a.m. and the entire left side of my body was numb. I had no idea what happened. I went to the doctor the next day, thought it could have been a heart attack. I didn't know what was going on. And she said, you had a panic attack. And I had no idea what that was. And the more I learned about it, the more I was like, oh, I felt like I was dying. And then that precipitated another panic attack. Has anybody ever had a panic attack? I don't know that you want to talk about it, but it's incredibly, you feel like you're going to die. It's like an anxiety attack times 10. It's so scary. And it's the problem with the panic disorder is that you have panic attacks because you're so afraid of having a panic attack. So it's, but what I learned 18 years ago was I was actually fearing the panic attack. And as soon as I accepted that it wasn't reflecting reality and there was actually nothing to be afraid of other than these bodily sensations, the panic attacks disappeared. And I've had one or two since then. And I actually will just sit there, and this is the best treatment for it, I believe. Just sit there and let the body do what it's going to process, what it's going to do. Because it's going to last for 20 to 40 minutes. Anxiety works the same way. It's just kind of a bodily chemical response. Just let it do what it's going to do and don't be afraid of it, because the fear of it actually creates more of it. So this is when I really started studying this whole idea of being afraid of emotions, difficult emotions. So do what scares you until it doesn't, because it's really about training your nervous system. So you've heard the term about comfort zone. So what I've been talking about is another way of talking about the comfort zone. This is what we're familiar with, and everything outside of that is scary and overwhelming, so we avoid it. But when we avoid and give into things we're uncomfortable, then our comfort zone actually shrinks. So to kind of widen and enlarge our world, we have to push into the stretch zone. And you have to decide what is a stretch for you. There is such a thing as doing too much too fast, and then you get up into the panic zone, and then you end up just kind of reinforcing the fear because it's so overwhelming. But you can decide how to get into the stretch zone. What can you do to get out there? If it's pain, listen to Bruce Lee. It'll leave once it's finished teaching you. When you replace, why is this happening to me, with what is this trying to teach me? So you get fired or divorced or have a child leave the church or somebody die. Instead of looking at, I've got to escape this terrible feeling, this grief, lean into it and figure out what you can learn from it. Some of you might be thinking, and probably have tried to practice this, well, can't I just suppress and kind of bury the negative emotions and then just kind of focus on the positive emotions? I think that would be a natural response. But Brene Brown says we cannot selectively numb emotions. When we numb emotions, painful emotions, we also numb the positive emotions. So anybody who's had trauma in their background knows this because they've tried to bury that in their past, but they can't selectively exclude that part of their life because then that numbs them entirely and then they can't feel the highs of life. So I want to show you a video, this next video of somebody who's really feeling the ups and downs of life.
No, 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 no! Oh, wait, much better! Oh, yeah!
That's what life feels like when properly lived. The scripture opposition in all things is really true. You can't have just positive emotions. You have to have the ups and the downs. So there was a BYU grad that was sick of running away from difficult situations. He'd realized he'd done that from youth. He'd faced difficult situations and running through. So he set out and he would do blog posts on each of these days. He wanted to do 100 days of rejection therapy so he could retrain his nervous system to handle rejection in difficult situations. So he did this famous talk, on a TED talk that's probably got 20, 30 million views by now, and then he ended up writing this book. But let me play a couple videos from him.
Day one. Borrow $100 from stranger. So this is where I went to where I was working. I came downstairs and saw this big guy sitting behind the desk. You know, he looked like a security guard. So I just approached him, and I was just walking, and that was the longest walk in my life. I just hair at the back of my neck standing up. I was sweating, and my heart was pounding. And I got there and said, "Hey, sir, can I borrow $100 from you?" And he looked up. He's like, "No." "Why?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry." Then I turned around and just ran. I felt so embarrassed. But because I filmed myself, so that night I was watching myself getting rejected, I just saw how scared I was. I looked like this kid in Sixth Sense. I saw dead people. But then I saw this guy, he wasn't that menacing. He was chubby, lovable guy, and he even asked me why. In fact, he invited me to explain myself. And I could have said many things. I could have explained, I could have negotiated. I didn't do any of that. All I did was run. I felt, wow, this is like a microcosm of my life. Every time I feel the slightest rejection, I would just run as fast as I could.
So this is really about leaning into something to retrain your nervous system. It's often called emotional regulation. So let me give you another of his examples.
All I did was run. I felt, wow, this is like a microcosm of my life. Every time I feel the slightest rejection, I would just run as fast as I could. And you know what? The next day, no matter what happens, I'm not gonna run. I'll stay engaged. Day two, request a burger refill. This is where I went to a burger joint, I finished lunch, and I went to the cashier and said, "Hey, can I get a burger refill?" And he was all confused. I was like, "What's a burger refill?" I said, "Well, just like a drink refill, but with a burger." And he said, "Sorry, we don't do burger refill, man." So this is where rejection happened. I could have run, but I stayed. I said, "Well, I love your burger, I love your joint, and if you guys do a burger refill, I would love you guys more." And he said, "Well, okay, I'll tell my manager about it. Well, maybe we'll do it, but sorry, we can't do this today." Then I left. And by the way, I don't think they ever done burger refill. I think they're still there. But the life and death feeling I was feeling the first time was no longer there, just because I stayed engaged, because I didn't run. I said, "Wow, great, I'm already learning things."
So I actually had a student try to replicate this that had come to my class, and he actually did the burger refill. He got rejected, but he would do things like when he was in line, try to trade places with the person in front of him. He said he did that 3 times and nobody complained. I was like, only in Utah. Go to New York and try that. And he tried several other things and just to get over his fear. So here's his 100 days of rejection therapy. I'll just let you read that for a second. I'd recommend you go find this TED Talk. It's worth watching. Okay, so let me ask the question. How does leaning into something uncomfortable change the nature of the thing? we kind of talked about it, but let me go into it a little more.
A bunch of years ago, I was watching the Olympics, and I noticed that all of the reporters always asked all of the athletes the same question, which is, are you nervous or were you nervous? And all of the athletes answered the question the exact same way. No, I'm excited. No, I was excited. And I realized that the characteristics of nervousness are clammy hands, your heart starts pounding, you start envisioning the future. The characteristics of excitement are clammy hands, your heart starts pounding, you start envisioning the future. But the reason the journalists were asking, are you nervous, is because they would be nervous. Where these elite athletes had learned the mindset and learned to interpret that anxiety as excitement. And so all of the athletes gave the same answer and all of the journalists asked the same question because the journalists aren't elite athletes.
So this is my daughter that's starting at BYU this fall. She took the ACT 6 months ago, whenever it was. She came home, she's like, that was so fun. I can't believe it. I have no idea how good I did, but it was really enjoyable. Somebody taught me that excitement and fear are the same thing. So I just chose to be excited about it. I was like, yeah, I taught you that. So I don't know if you could tell, but growing up until about 18, I had a deathly fear of public speaking. I refused to give my mission farewell. Years later, fast forward to today, where I actually volunteer to give this lecture. It's the same feeling that I'm leaning into. And I actually love teaching. So I used to have this love-hate relationship with giving blood. About 2 years ago, I would start to get faint, lightheaded. They'd lean me back, put a cold cloth, put a fan on me, start talking to me to distract me. And every time I gave blood, I was like, okay, this is going to happen again. It must be something about the blood leaving my body that's having some physiological reaction. And then I realized, no, this is probably just anxiety. This is good old-fashioned anxiety. And I was like, well, what if I reinterpreted that feeling and that fear into a challenge? Like, how can I face this terrible feeling, this scared feeling? As soon as I thought of it as a challenge, the feeling entirely left my body. Now, every time I go, I'm actually anticipating trying to feel that feeling, and I haven't felt it in 2 years. Even though I'm wanting to feel it, it's not there because I'm actually looking forward to it. Fear only comes when we run away. And I've actually had times when I'm like, my hemoglobin is too low, and I'm like, oh, I don't need to donate. I'm like, I'm not going to walk away from that blood drive. So I actually turn around and go get blood anyway, because I don't want to give my brain a reason to be afraid of it again. So how can you lean into these difficult emotions? Maybe you can learn something new with boredom, conflict. Maybe you can lean in and have those difficult conversations. Maybe you can start small when you feel overwhelmed. When you fear rejection, reframe it as a learning opportunity. Fear of success, you could raise your self-worth, that you're worth it. Fear of being alone, be okay with it. Guilt, go talk to your bishop, go talk to God, whatever you need to do. Find out why you feel anger. Do the opposite of depression, move out and connect. Be vulnerable and share. Get started and have that awkward situation, because that takes practice to get over it. So Seinfeld can even teach us this, the lessons of doing the opposite of how we feel.
George, you know, that woman just looked at you.
So what? What am I supposed to do?
Go talk to her.
Elaine, bald men with no jobs and no money who live with their parents don't approach strange women.
Well, here's your chance to try the opposite. Instead of tuna salad and being intimidated by women, chicken salad and going right up to them.
Yeah, I should do the opposite. I should.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Yes. I will do the opposite. I used to sit here and do nothing and regret it for the rest of the day. So now I will do the opposite and I will do something. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice that you were looking in my direction.
Oh, yes, I was. You just ordered the same exact lunch as me.
My name is George. I'm unemployed and I live with my parents.
I'm Victoria. Hi.
See, it works every time. Again, it's leaning in and retraining your nervous system. So I'll end on this.
Just regulate, breathe. That's it. Now we got a legitimate fear. Breathe, breathe. It's okay. No, just breathe. You don't have to run. Breathe, keep breathing. Keep breathing. Deep. No, deep. Deep. Shh. Deep. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Deep breaths. Please don't bite me in the face. That's going to really freak her out. That's it. Keep breathing. Take a deep breath. Close your eyes. I'm not going to come near you. I'm going to step away. I'm going to step all the way over here. Okay, I want you to close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Okay, now I want you to picture in your mind what it is that you see when you see a snake. Okay, and I want you to start playing. Can you see it now? Can you see that picture? Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to turn the brightness down and just see what happens. Just turn the brightness down. So it's starting to go less bright, almost black and white. And there we go. It's a little bit black and white. Okay, now I want you to zoom away and zoom back. There we go. Okay, when you feel ready, open your eyes again. Feeling better? Okay, would you like me to step closer or would you like to step closer? That's it, keep breathing. That's it. There we go. Feel how beautiful he feels.
It's cold.
Yeah, poor little guy's been in air conditioning all day. Have a look at this one, he's a bit cute. Have you ever touched a snake before? No. Have you ever thought you would touch a snake?
I was peeing in my pants before.
It's okay, I thought I could smell something. It feels pretty good, huh?
It's actually cold.
Yeah. It feels so nice. It's okay. It's okay. He just wanted to turn around and say hello. It's okay.
Come back.
It's all right. When you're ready. Do you want to pick up the little one? There we go. He's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. She's so beautiful.
So God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Does anybody know the religious term for leaning in? I'm talking in psychological terms, but this is what faith is stepping into the unknown. You're not afraid of how you're going to feel. You're not afraid of what's going to happen. You lean in. Fear not, or some variation on that phrase, is mentioned 150 times in the Bible. It's a common theme with God. So I'm going to end with the summary. Just lean in and reframe and reinterpret what it means. So what uncomfortable emotions can you lean into? I'll just close. This is a lecture series I teach. I'll start about the third week in fall. You guys are welcome to attend if you'd like. Last semester we did it in the Irene Science Center. We had about 300 people. You're welcome to attend. You can scan that QR code and actually RSVP, and that'll put you on my email list so I can send you announcements about it. And then this is the next month's lecture for Well and Wise.